So welcome everybody. Glad to see you're all here, especially on a holiday week. Thank you for sharing your Thursday afternoon with us. In case there is anybody logged on who has not met me yet, I'm Megan Carney and I coordinate the Sustainability Fellows Program here at UNH. So on behalf of the Fellows Program and the Social Innovation Internship Program, we're pleased to welcome you to our 5th alumni panel webinar this summer. Last week we were lucky to hear from some of our partners and alumni who work on climate change, which, as you know, is a hugely broad field. We heard from a sociologist who works for an electric company, an atmospheric chemist who serves on his city's planning board, a political scientist who runs communication campaigns, and a chemist with an MBA who served in the Peace Corps and now works in higher ed. So I hope that if nothing else, all of this illustrated to you that there are so many ways to contribute in this field and there is so much work to be done. You just need to find a place to start, dig in, and take it from there. And that's why these programs exist. We hope that your fellowships and internships will serve as that starting point and to help launch your careers. As you know, there's tremendous opportunity in sustainability in the business sector as well, helping companies figure out how to not only minimize the negative impacts of their products and their operations, but how to maximize their positive impacts on the communities they work in and beyond. So today we're going to hear from some alumni and partners of the internship program, the fellowship program, and the semester in the city program, who work within the realm of sustainable business, which is aligned with SDG number 12, which is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. We'll start with a quick video, which illustrates what this looks like in one industry, fashion, and then we'll hear from our panel about what this looks like in some others. So Faina, would you go ahead and start the video?
We consume so much generally these days, and so many people are buying clothes just for Instagram, just for taking pictures and then throwing them away, and it's just not sustainable. So it's really exciting to be here at UNEA and being part of the Sustainable Fashion Alliance. We get to see some of the people who are working on sustainable fashion, also in developing, using technology, developing new fibers that are sustainable. They have low water impact, they have low impact on the environment where they're being produced. So this is what's really cool when you combine technology, science, and fashion. And I think it's really important. We support companies that are making a difference in the way that they produce their clothes. And as consumers, we need to think about where they come from, how long we get to use them for, and what happens when we're done. I'm Nadia Hotegalong, and I'm asking you to solve different by choosing what you wear.
All right. All right. Having some trouble here. Hi, everyone. My name's Faina. Thanks so much for joining us again. I'm the program director for the Changemaker Collaborative, formerly the Center for Social Innovation and Enterprise, and I oversee the Summer Social Innovation Internship Program. So I am super excited today to introduce our moderator, Ashley Davis. So she graduated from Providence College with a BS in Marketing, Spanish, and Environmental Science in 2007 and completed the Harvard Business School Executive Education Program on Creating Shared Value in 2016. Currently, Ashley holds the role of Director of Global Corporate Responsibility at Cole Haan, where she's been for over 12 years. Cole Haan, with its global headquarters in Greenland, New Hampshire, and Creative Center in New York City, is an iconic American lifestyle accessories brand and retailer of premium footwear, handbags, and leather accessories, as well as outerwear and eyewear. In Cole Haan's manufacturing region in southern India, a severe flood in November of 2015 devastated the territory, affecting drinking water sources, critical to the livelihood of its people. So in response, Cole Haan, with Ashley's leadership, partnered with the global nonprofit Planet Water Foundation, local suppliers, and local schools and communities in India to provide access to clean water and sanitation and hygiene education. And since 2016, Cole Haan has deployed 3 aqua towers. Ashley's also a First Mover Fellow for the Aspen Institute, which is an innovation lab and leadership development program for corporate social entrepreneurs who are accomplished innovators inside companies, creating new products, services, and management practices that deliver business value to their company and positive social and environmental outcomes for the world. The First Movers Fellowship strengthens the capacity of fellows to lead change within their company and their industry, which collectively over time will redefine how business is done and how success is measured. She's also an advisor to the board of Souls for Souls, an organization that turns unwanted shoes and clothing into opportunity by keeping them from going to waste and putting them to good use, providing relief, creating jobs, and empowering people to break the cycle of poverty. And for the last 4 years, she sat on the Social Responsibility Steering Committee for the American Apparel and Footwear Association, the national trade association representing apparel, footwear, and other sewn products companies, and their suppliers, which compete in the global market. It represents more than 1,000 world-famous name brands and our trusted public policy and political voice of the apparel and footwear industry, its management and shareholders, its nearly 4 million US workers, and its contribution of more than 400 billion in annual US retail sales. We're incredibly grateful to have you join us today. And with that, I'll hand the webinar over to you, Ashley. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Faina. Wow, I think you took up my 5 minutes of speaking. Are we done? I think it's the panelists' turn. Thank you. That's very, very generous and true. So yeah, I work in the fashion industry and am intimately familiar with supply chains. I spend, when we're not in coronavirus situations, I spend at least 4 months out of the year in Asia with supply chain. So that issue from the video is near and dear to my heart. But generally, I wanted to start with a question, not to elicit response right now, but just a question for you to be thinking about in the background, which is, what would it be like to wake up tomorrow in a world where every business that you interact with has embraced a model that helps all stakeholders in the value chain to succeed? If this was the world that we were living in before COVID-19, we would have responded to the crisis very differently. Today, our economic growth largely is at the expense of the planet, and it's at the expense of societies and people that are furthest from the center of the business or furthest from making short-term capital gains, such as workers on factory floors or environmental impacts in other countries that can't be seen by key decision makers. So to create value for all stakeholders, including the planet, including all societies, is really the responsibility of all businesses today to lead with purpose and authentic intent. I don't think the superficiality of glossy sustainability reports or aspirational marketing language or ESG checklists or even claims of SDG pursuits, Sustainable Development Goal pursuits, are enough. They're not enough to reverse the impacts that we've made if we continue in this direction. So instead, what I believe is to build a resilient economy or a successful society for all stakeholders. We have to change the way we operate. We can't operate in the way that we used to. And successful societies have to take this multi-stakeholder approach where all stakeholders in the value chain are valued and success is created for them through the business. So the financial crisis that we're in right now, and my brand is right in the middle of that, especially for retailers with doors closed. So the financial crisis has been compared to what happened after 9/11 or the recession of 2008, where we actually saw sort of a backsliding of these SDGs, of pursuit of the SDGs. We saw a backsliding of it was no longer as important as it was before, environmental impacts and social impacts of business and society, because, oh my gosh, we have a financial crisis and we can't afford to think about that stuff, was sort of the thinking. And so I've heard it compared, and I've heard the fear today that today, in the midst of coronavirus, that financial impact will be the same, and that we will go backwards many, many years. I don't think this is true. I don't think it can be compared at all, because the global health crisis that we're experiencing currently, there's not a business or a person or a country that it hasn't impacted. And to lead in a future that is highly volatile, very uncertain, as we've all heard, this almost become the cliche, and certainly ambiguous, in order to thrive and to lead as businesses and as societal, as citizens, we need radical transparency and purpose. And we can look at what happened. I mean, the supply chains, it is laid bare for all to see right now, just how terribly our decision-making and the ripple effect we've had on the most invisible people in supply chains. And we can look out the window and we can see the change and the shift in nature when everything slows down and businesses slow down and consumption, production slows down. We can't unsee this stuff and we can't unexperience it. And so I think what will be called for is that transparency of like, what the hell are you doing with your business and how is my product being made? And if there's a demand for transparency, then there will also be a demand for purpose. And purpose is not the same as short-term capital gains. And the decision-making around short-term capital gains has to be decoupled from the purpose of business. Otherwise, in that decision-making, there isn't space for environment or society to thrive. So purpose and authenticity and transparency are what is called for us as individuals, as people who work in these organizations, and as decision makers and leaders. Transparency and purpose of the business and ourselves is what is called for in order for the environment, in order for the society to thrive going forward. So I think values and purpose-led businesses and individuals are who will win in the future. So that's from me. I'm going to begin one by one to introduce the panelists. And we'll start with Keegan Smith, who is the recycling specialist for Liberty Coca-Cola. Keegan, take it away. Who are you?
Sure. So again, my name is Keegan Smith. I graduated from UNH with a degree in environmental conservation and sustainability, and that was in 2017. It's kind of crazy to believe that was 3 years ago now. So, but I was a member, I guess you could say, an intern with the social innovation internship in 2015 and 2016. So I was lucky enough to be in the program for 2 years. My first internship was with the Coca-Cola bottler up in New England. That was called at the time Coca-Cola Bottling Company of Northern New England, which is now Coca-Cola Bottlers Northeast. And at the time when I interned there, they were pretty small. They started up in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, and they kept acquiring and expanding. So now that they have basically all of New England and upstate New York, which is crazy. So fast forward to the year after that, in 2016, I interned at Stonyfield Yogurt, organic yogurt. And there I worked on a whole bunch of things. I got to look at some of the environmental impacts of the paperboard that they're using for some of their yogurt products, trying to see what the cost analysis of that would be, stuff like that. And with Coca-Cola, I was traveling with the sustainability booth that they had, which showcased what the bottling company was doing with all their bottles and cans when it was being recycled. Because up in New England, there are New England and Northeast, there are 5 states with bottle bills. And a bottle bill is basically what I still work in today, where they have deposits. So if you recycle your bottle and can that you paid a deposit on, you recycle it, you get your 5 cents back to incentivize recycling. And up in New England, and even what I'm doing with Liberty Coca-Cola now, is a lot of the bottles were being recycled into North Face jackets. A lot of the bottles are being made into carpeting, into lining of Ford vehicles and stuff like that locally within New England. And we wanted to show people basically the economics of how all that works and how recycling is not only good for the environment, but good for the local economy as well. But today we're a little bit more focused on closing the loop with our bottles and cans. And we're asking ourselves some hard questions of how do we take every bottle and can right now and recycle all the bottles and cans we put out there by 2030. So we're having a lot of meetings of what kind of systems do we support? What do we want to get behind? What are we going to announce in a couple of years that I wish I could talk about right now, but legally can't? We have a lot of things up our sleeve to address those sort of things. But the internship was great because, of course, I'm still with Coca-Cola. The internship gave me 2 great opportunities to market myself as someone with experience to get a job in sustainability, which is very hard to get, believe it or not, right out of college on day one. So very, very fortunate to be a part of the program, and we'll do anything to pay it forward in that respect. But I transferred to Liberty Coca-Cola, which I'll talk about. I know I'm probably short on time now, but Liberty Coca-Cola is the Coca-Cola bottler that distributes Coca-Cola products, Monster products, Dr. Pepper products, in New York City and the Philadelphia metro areas across 5 states. And basically what I do now is I oversee the deposit systems in Connecticut and New York City. So that's what I do now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Keegan. Thanks for that great intro. Exciting.
Sure.
And moving on to our next panelist is Laurie Johnson. He's the principal consultant for CNS companies. And Corey, I just want to give you a heads up. I'll give you a little in the chat. I'll just let you know when you have a couple minutes left so you don't feel like you have to rush. Take it away.
Awesome. Very good. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Laurie Johnson, and I was a sustainability fellow, I think it was back in 2009 or 2010. I absolutely love the program, and I've been thrilled to be still connected to it over the years. So I'm a graduate of UNH as well, and UNH is really where I fell in love with sustainability. I still remember almost to the day I had my, the crap scared out of me about climate change, it was then that I really got the opportunity to get involved in sustainability at UNH, and at that time there was a really good connection between UNH and what was then called Clean Air Cool Planet, and some of you may be familiar with that organization, which is where the Sustainability Fellowship really got its roots. But I had the opportunity to get involved in a number of different ways, both at UNH and also with the fellowship. One of my opportunities there was to develop a carbon calculator to work with municipalities around the state of New Hampshire to help them conduct their first greenhouse gas emissions inventories. And then also kind of my proper sustainability fellowship was working with the Portsmouth Chamber of Commerce in New Hampshire to help them expand their corporate sustainability initiatives and composting in local area restaurants. And so UNH is just really where I got my start in sustainability. I'm very grateful for those opportunities. When I left UNH, that's really where I started to focus on corporate sustainability. And my first job out of college was with Pax World Mutual Funds in Portsmouth. And there I was part of their ESG sustainability research team, which was really neat. I got a lot of exposure to a lot of different sustainability issues across every sector you can think of. And so that was a really good opportunity in the finance world to integrate sustainability. I ended up going back to grad school after that, and there I focused on energy. I realized during my time at UNH and also during the Pax World job that energy was really the piece of sustainability that I loved most. And so I had a lot of great opportunities in grad school to get some cool experience. I did some university sustainability at Yale while I was studying there. And I also had the opportunity to intern at Lockheed Martin, which was really interesting. So if you want to talk about implementing sustainability in a giant, conservative, kind of hierarchical organization, I could probably write a case study on it. But so that was really fascinating, and got some exposure to sustainability reporting. And one thing I was able to do successfully there was implement context-based sustainability and help them to start thinking about their emissions within kind of the broader scheme of global carbon pathways. And so I was proud to be able to shift the sustainability mindset of a company like that. After grad school, though, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I started working for Booz Allen Hamilton and their energy division. And there I was supporting primarily Department of Defense clients on energy topics. And so again, I went from kind of a stodgy organization like Lockheed Martin to an even stodgier organization like the United States Marine Corps. And, you know, in all of these experiences, what I learned was that doing sustainability really doesn't change much in whatever organization you're in, but what changes radically is what you call it and how you communicate it. So I found that whether at UNH, whether at Portsmouth Chamber of Commerce, whether at Lockheed Martin or the United States Marine Corps, it's really all about messaging and messaging appropriately to make sure that you're getting buy-in from stakeholders and using their language. So, you know, when we went from the Obama administration to the current administration, it went from energy efficiency, renewables, you know, the military was all on board. And then it transitioned to energy resilience, you know, using energy to meet the mission, whatever it was, basically the same work, but just calling it something different. And so that was kind of a case study in messaging for me. Towards the end of my Booz Allen Hamilton experience, I had somewhat of a awakening experience. And one of my biggest passions in life is flying. I'm a private pilot myself, and I actually spent probably a little bit too much of my job at Booz Allen Hamilton staring out the window at airplanes taking off at Reagan National Airport in DC. But one of the parts that I am so guilty about with that passion is just I realized that flying is not exactly the most sustainable hobby. And so what I wanted to do was find a way to really merge my passion for aviation with sustainability. And so I set out on a quest to network with just about anyone who could talk to me. And I talked to airports, I talked to airlines, I talked to consulting firms. And finally, I landed in the position where I am now. I'm a principal consultant with C&S companies. And we are an aviation design and construction firm. And we have a very small but growing sustainability practice where we help airports implement renewable energy projects, sustainability management, sustainability reporting. And so it's just really thrilling for me to be able to go to work every day and be engaged in two things that I'm just over the moon excited about. And, you know, I think the lesson there for me is you can be in sustainability for 10 years and still find kind of new niches and new avenues to pursue your interests. So if you haven't quite found what really drives you yet, don't give up hope. Took me a little while, but and who's to know? I could find something else too. So that's about it for me, and I'm looking forward to a discussion a bit later. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. I can totally see you as a pilot now. Very cool. Love that. Jill Howard. Jill Howard is the Sustainable Retail Reporting Analyst at Ahold Delhaize, or previously, for some of us who have been around, made in New England for a while, previously Hannaford. Jill, welcome.
Hi, so my name is Jill. I graduated from UNH just last year in 2019. And when I was there, I was studying business and did a self-designed option in social innovation and enterprise. So I was lucky. I met Fiona and Faina in the center really early on in my career at UNH, and had gone in studying business, but knowing I had recently kind of learned what social innovation was and knew that I wanted to study business in the context of using it as a force for social and environmental change. So was able to connect with Fiona, and she helped me to design that option where I was studying like the core business classes, but then also taking some classes on social policy and social issues to kind of be able to combine those together. So I worked for the Center for Social Innovation all 4 years that I was at UNH. And while I didn't do the summer social innovation internship, I was recruiting students to be sitting in your shoes, recruiting them to do semester in the city in all of our programs. So in the fall, I did fall of my junior year, I did semester in the city, where I worked at the Boston Chamber of Commerce on their economic growth team. And was working on programs related to racial and economic equity in the city, which, especially in light of everything that's happening right now, that was like a really eye-opening experience for me. Really difficult, but definitely can say going into having my first like full-time office job now, that internship is what made me feel completely comfortable and like ready to come in on day one and not worried about the transition from college to full-time working. So after that, I studied abroad in New Zealand for a semester, and then when I came back, I worked with Fiona on starting the Be Impact Clinic. So I'm sure through the center you've heard about that, but we gathered small groups of students to help companies, local companies, go through the Be Impact certification assessment. So I went through the assessment with one company kind of as a trial run in the fall, and then in the spring was able to work with Fiona to be a student mentor and kind of help run the program, which was a really great experience. And getting to do the Be Impact clinic and go through that assessment was also something that really prepared me for my job now that I didn't realize it was when I was doing it. And was one of those things that like on the first day when my manager sent out an email introducing me to the team and the people I'd be working with, was like, Jill's worked on the Be Impact assessment and she knows like how to go through all of that. So just thought that was cool that when I was doing it, I didn't think it would be such a huge asset, but it really has been. So last year when I graduated, I still didn't know what I was going to be doing. I was still looking for a job. And around this time last summer, Fiona helped me out because she received a message from my previous manager on LinkedIn saying, we have this job open. Do you know of any recent UNH grads that might be interested? So I was lucky enough to get it. And now I'm working for I'll Hold Delays, which is the parent company of Hannaford, Stop and Shop, a bunch of grocery stores in the US, and then also about 7 other grocery brands in Europe and Indonesia. So our I'll Hold Delays is based in the Netherlands. But I'm in Portland, Maine, and I'm based in the Hannaford office here. So my team I work for like what they call the Global Support Organization. And there's about 10 of us on the Sustainable Retailing team. So aside from our VP of Sustainable Retailing, most of the other people on our team are like topic specialists and experts. So with areas relating to our strategy, like health and nutrition and climate, food waste, they're working on kind of moving our strategy forward. But what I do is the data analysis for all of these different topics. So I thought I'd show, if I can share my screen quickly, I thought this would be a really good visual to show what I do, especially because like last year I had no idea that this was a thing and what I could be doing. But so I collect data on a quarterly basis from all of our brands across the globe around healthy food sales, food waste, climate, safety at work, all different topics. And so this is our annual report, which is kind of like what the data is being put into at the end of the year, what we're working towards. And so you can see here, these are all the numbers that I'm interacting with on a daily basis where, for example, a growth driver of our strategy is to promote healthier eating. So we measure that by measuring the percentage of healthy own brand food sales as a total of our own brand food sales. And so these are like the consolidated numbers I'm working with, our target for 2020. And we go through all different topic areas. So sustainable commodities, social compliance, safety at work, there's a bunch on climate. But this is all the data that I'm interacting with on a daily basis and helping to communicate it externally as well as internally, and noticing trends and basically plugging it in throughout the organization in various areas where all the sustainability data could be helpful. So that's what I do. I'm really excited to be here today and talk with you all, especially because it's just like I said, like in your shoes just a year ago. So happy to talk more about like I haven't even been at my job for a full year now. It's more like 10 months. So, but happy to talk about like what the transition is like and what a entry-level sustainability job looks like. And yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jill. I got lost in your story and I didn't even know it was at time. Thank you. So now we will go ahead and open it up to questions. So if you want to raise your hand or put your just send me a message. I'm monitoring the chat. So if you just say you have a question, and then I'll call on you, and then you can introduce yourself and speak your question. You don't have to type the full question into the box. Just somehow let me know in the chat that you would like to be called on and have a question to ask. Faina, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I'll start this party. Can any of you talk about any previous roles that you've had? And I think Corey kind of started this, where you've had to implement or wanted to implement some sustainability initiatives at a company organization that really didn't want you to. So for all of you, and Ashley also.
Give the panelists a shot at this. Anybody want to give me a wave if you're super eager to answer Faina's question about internal challenges or difficulty?
Well, I think with sustainability, you're always going to have a struggle. I mean, most companies are pretty compartmentalized and isolated in their own little silos. And the challenge of sustainability is to get people from different silos together to get a project done. So I know, personally speaking, I'm not saying that Coca-Cola doesn't, I mean, especially our bottler, we're very sustainability oriented. It's in our values, but we're also very new. Liberty Coca-Cola, the bottler, officially started in, I think, 2018. So as a brand new bottler taking over territory that used to actually be owned by the Coca-Cola company, there were a lot of things that needed to be updated. So that includes recycling. And I know right now we're trying to work on getting a One Liberty approach on recycling within our own facilities, because we can't be going out and telling people to recycle our bottles and cans if we're not doing it ourselves. So it's not that people are saying, no, we don't want to do it. It's getting the time to get people to do it, getting people to realize how important it is and how it can actually save money. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned. And this is something I learned at Stonyfield was, that's great. You can point out all the things you did from a sustainability standpoint, but in the business world, money talks. So when you can say, oh, but like we recycled all these bottles and cans and paper and stuff like that, and we also saved a couple $100,000 this year, that's a win-win, and that gets everybody's attention. And that is something that I learned from Stonyfield that was important. Previous roles, I was actually one of Hannaford in New Hampshire, one of Hannaford's best cart retrieval specialists in high school. But I say that because I think that getting experiences, even something as hard as pushing carts and being a cashier, I think those are good things to have in your resume, because one, it can tell your future employers that you worked hard, you've worked for minimum wage, you've worked with the public, you know how to talk to people, you know customer service skills. So I think building up a resume and building up a network of people that are truly your friends is good for getting a job out of college as well.
Yeah, I would agree with Keegan. I see we have a couple other questions, so I'm going to make this short, but my fellowship and my partnership with the Aspen Institute is about, so a social impact intrapreneur is someone working entrepreneurially within the organization, most often upstream against resistance. So I will say there's nothing that I have taken on that has happened easily. And just to sort of repeat what Keegan said, relationship building is huge, but it's also sort of what I said in my opening. It's about finding the alignment with the purpose within the organization, and that does connect certainly to the profit. So to move a sustainability initiative or an impact initiative forward, where I have found it to be less difficult is when it is strategically aligned with the goals of the organization and what the business stands for. as well as those relationships and understanding who the key decision makers are and making sure you build your allyship within the organization with decision makers who will pull your project forward. So each of my initiatives have been adopted by C-level executives because I've found ways to connect with their personal values and their business values. So let's, anybody else want to add to that before we go to the questions that are coming in? Jill or Corey? Okay.
No, I'm good. I'd say let's get some more questions in.
Super. All right, Alec, would you like to ask your question, please?
Sure, thank you. Hi, my name is Alec Golkovich. I'm a grad student at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. And this I'm working with the town of Kennebunk, Maine, making a climate action plan with some greenhouse gas inventories. So Ashley, you kind of just covered it a little bit, but I figured I'll ask it anyway. Some of our projects have to do with recommending projects to the towns, trying to get them on board with what we think would be a good project for them. But especially now in COVID-19 economic situation everyone is in, it's kind of hard to get those projects on board with everybody else. So a lot of you were talking about marketing. So I was wondering if anybody could help with some marketing strategies or something like that to try to get our projects actually, instead of in the back of their mind, just like in the forefront of what's going on, and that they'll actually consider what we are trying to do for our projects.
Okay, so how to get consideration, real consideration for these projects to move forward, and how to communicate that. Who wants to take this question? Anybody want clarification on the question? Alec, do you want to just ask? Oh yeah, go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, Alec, I just want to make sure I understand. So are you looking for kind of marketing tactics to sell your projects to the key stakeholders?
Yeah, and specifically because, like, for example, I just had a town hall meeting when we were talking about sustainability issues, but they were pretty much only concerned with laws pertaining to the pandemic and economics factors pertaining to the pandemic. And they really weren't considering anything else besides that.
Yeah, I think local government is an interesting beast, and having worked in it a little bit over the years, I can definitely sympathize with you in that a lot of times they're focused on ordinances, they're focused on local laws and regulations, and you know, sometimes it can be hard to get around that. I would probably echo what Ashley said about really trying to understand kind of local values and tying your project and the way you communicate it to what is important to that community. And this isn't necessarily true of just municipalities, but really any project. Even with the airports we work with, you'd be amazed how different one airport can be from another in terms of what drives them internally and what makes their director go, oh yeah, let's do that. And so really kind of customizing your communications to kind of pull on the heartstrings, right? If it's a community if it's a coastal community, I mean, you know, talking about preserving their shoreline or whatever it may be. If it's a community that's dependent on tourism, you know, talking about economic implications and whatever that may entail. But yeah, I think just really hitting those values that are unique to that local community would be helpful for your communications.
Thanks, Corey. Jill or Keegan?
I would maybe add, I personally don't have a ton of experience in government, but thinking about the ways that my team, when we're trying to implement a sustainability strategy and present it to our executive committee to get accepted, I think two huge things that we always like to emphasize are what like our competitors are doing. So examples of what other towns are doing, other people that are leading in the area is always good, I think, to just get like some competition and make people want to be as good as the leading practices. And then also, and Corey, I think you kind of touched on this, but presenting like the long-term risk analysis of if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. So that's the position we've taken when trying to get some new climate targets across, is explaining, like, listen, if we don't start acting on this really aggressively right now, this is what the world's going to look like in 30 years, and this is how it's affecting our company or our town, in all the negative impacts that we're going to have. So we need to manage these risks. I think that's always a helpful way to look at it too.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, I definitely agree. Reputational risk mitigation and long-term mitigation of those environmental impacts is helpful. And there's nothing wrong with a little bit of guilt and shaming sometimes. But I would also add patience. Sometimes it's just not the moment. And it needs to be connected to whatever is most important to them right now. Keegan, anything else to add there?
I think you all kind of hit the nail on the head, but I think one thing that's important to consider, especially in Kennebunk and Kennebunkport, is that the impacts of coastal, changes are probably going to be a lot more damning than COVID-19 in areas like that. So I think you guys hit the nail on the head.
Awesome, thanks, Keegan. Thank you for your question, Alec. Moving on to Amina. Would you like to share your question?
Hi, I'm Amina Grant. I'm a graduate student at the University of Iowa, and I'm working with the City of Concord, New Hampshire on some greenhouse gas emissions inventories. My question has been touched on a little bit, but were there any times within your organizations where good or bad PR or consumers helped drive change?
Sorry, animal intervention. Anyone chopping to answer this question? Jill.
Yeah. So I think from the perspective of like a food retailer, it's been really interesting for me over the past few months to think about, I think there's always the question of what you're saying, like how much should businesses be taking responsibility and just making the change versus how much do we need to take the burden on ourselves as consumers? And I've always, coming into this job, felt like the businesses just need to do it. They need to be the ones to lead the way. What I've seen when it comes down to like executive decision making, I think there definitely needs to be a pretty high amount of customer demand in order for a CEO or whoever's running the company to feel like it's actually worth it for them to move forward with spending a ton of money, implementing new programs, maybe even hiring new people. So something like that comes to mind within the food space is sustainable proteins. And that's been a pretty big conversation with us, trying to move away from selling so much meat and sell more sustainable proteins. And ultimately, because even though the market share is growing and there is more interest in it, our executive committee and the people that are at the top of our business don't necessarily want to dive into that right now because they don't see that there's enough consumer interest or consumer demand to really make it worth it. Whereas in other areas, like with climate, we're seeing that customers are like demanding that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and be more aware of other areas like that. So I do think they're actually, especially when it's a retail company or a consumer goods company, what customers are demanding can be really, really impactful in getting decisions finally made.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, that's I've heard that called the 2x4 effect. That reputational sort of PR damage that could happen to a company, and it's also really important to think about what kind of company they are. Is this part of their DNA already? Is it not? Are they privately held? Are they a B Corp? Probably less likely to have issues there. Are they public? What drives them, and what drives that C-suite decision making is important to consider also. Corey or Keegan, more to add here?
Yeah, well, I think that Coca-Cola is no stranger to bad publicity, and sometimes I'll be honest, I think sometimes rightfully so. I'll give you an example just because I'm in the recycling field with Coca-Cola. I mean, one of the reasons why I got into this is because I used to go fishing a lot. I was always a terrible fisherman, but I used to go fishing a lot. It's especially in New Hampshire. I grew up in Londonderry, New Hampshire, and I used to go to all the local rivers to go fishing. And a lot of the trails that I would go on to go to our fishing spots along these rivers were always littered with bottles and cans. And I was kind of astonished because even people that were into the outdoors, like people that were into fishing and hiking, were still littering. And I thought that was just crazy. And I got into UNH, and a lot like what Corey was saying, that's where I really fell in love with sustainability, especially with business. So with Coca-Cola, if you talked about plastics 20 years ago, no one would care. I mean, I don't think even the public was really, as concerned about that. I think our biggest battle back then was the sugar content in a lot of our beverages. And I think we've made a lot of traction in both those areas. But nowadays, when we're talking about recycling and what Coke supports, in terms of collecting those bottles and cans, I think we've come a very long way. I mean, some of our leaders now said that, even well thought, well run, modern deposit systems are not out of the equation for us right now. And that's groundbreaking in the Coca-Cola system. If we were to say that 20 years ago, that person would get fired, because we were spending tons of money in public relations to fight bottle bills. And now we're saying it's on the table if we do it right. There's systems. I mean, I took a trip out to Oregon and out to British Columbia to study the systems out there, where the distributors are the ones that are running it. And they're well-run systems. And now in Oregon, they have a return rate of 99%. And basically, it's really, I mean, it's a very efficient system cost-wise. It's way less than what we're paying in New York, because New York, the bottle system there was forced on to the distributors, whereas we couldn't do it the way that we wanted to. The state said, we're going to do it, based on the way we write the bill, because you're the ones that fought it against us. And it came back, and, we basically shot ourselves in the foot. So yes, I mean, there is a lot of consumer demand that drives change in businesses. But I think, especially as our generations come into play in these businesses, I think there's also change internally, which is enlightening to see. And that gives me hope. So that was a good question. Thanks,
Keegan. Corey, anything else to add here?
Yeah, I can add just a brief example, and I apologize for keep using airport examples here, but that's kind of the world I'm in now. But I think you'll see that it's applicable elsewhere too. None of you will be surprised to know that airports and trees do not mix, and airports are constantly kind of managing the trees around their airfields for multiple reasons, but aircraft safety, but also wildlife. So a really interesting thing at airports is wildlife management and making sure you don't have habitats near the airport that are encouraging deer to come onto the runways or whatever it may be. So we worked with an airport that had to clear a pretty large tract of forest land on its property, and it caused an outrage in the community, because it was kind of a sustainability-minded community, and there was a lot of bad PR associated with that. And so they actually brought us on as airport sustainability consultants to help them fix the problem. And what we ended up doing is going through this whole solar energy development process, where we helped them build solar panels on this cleared land that they otherwise, I mean, this was not a sustainability minded organization. And so the kind of this PR problem segued into a sustainability solution. And I'm not a huge fan of that as like a driver for sustainability, right? You don't want the sustainability. Ideally, it should kind of come within and come from grassroots. But in some situations, a problem like that can open a door for a sustainability solution in an organization that otherwise wouldn't necessarily do that. So just kind of an interesting perspective on a bad PR event.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, I think the topic of PR is really, really fascinating and can be a very strong motivator. I personally don't care what the motivators are, as long as things get better. So just really two quick examples from my world that I think are really strong in this space. One is Nike from the 1990s. Nike's still associated with child labor because of the bad PR that they received of the children packing the bladders in Pakistan into the soccer balls. So that's one. And their sustainable innovation department, which is now hundreds of people around the world, grew out of that. Nike's a marketing company. They're not doing this necessarily to tug at heartstrings, but because it's good for business and because they had a terrible, terrible PR issue that still lingers today. The other is how my department was born and built, was I absolutely took advantage of bad PR. And to connect to something that Jill said earlier about the competition or competitors, is to look at how have competitors either thrived or fallen because of bad PR connected to whatever type of argument you're trying to make. So mine was building a corporate responsibility department that cared about the working conditions of, or that considered the working conditions of our factories. And so factory in Bangladesh called Rana Plaza had just collapsed. And I said, we don't want to be associated. You don't want to be associated with that, do you? So we had not suffered from bad PR, but many of our peers had, and that helped to build the department that I lead today. So I think the possibility of good or bad PR is incredibly motivating and strong. All right, so Jacob, thank you for your patience.
Hi guys, my name's my name is Jacob Nelson, and I'm working this summer with the New Hampshire Food Alliance to understand and improve the climate resilience of the food system in New Hampshire. And my question was very similar to Amina's, but I'll adjust it a little bit. I'm curious, from your perspectives, what types of change have to be done internally from your positions versus the things that can be advocated for or pushed by consumers externally? And then I'm also curious, obviously bad PR is a huge weapon, but what are some of the other, maybe weapons bad imagery, but what are some of the other tactics consumers can use to push brands to do better in this space?
Great question around individual responsibility. Who wants to take this one? Just go ahead and unmute yourself, jump in, or ask for clarification.
So yeah, just to clarify, when you say change with, are you asking like what can we do to change from within before that publicity kind of pressures companies to do something? Is that your question?
My question is just, I mean, there's things that consumers can, I'm imagining there's things that consumers can demand and that will bring change, but there's other types of things that we can't touch that happen within your companies, but there still needs to be sustainability done in those fields. I mean, like, we don't know about the energy efficiency of your recycling operation. That's
Right.
going to come from you. So that's one example. But if there's other things to help us understand the things we have control over as consumers versus the things that we'd have to join, corporate sustainability professional world to affect change.
Right, and I'll be brief because I think I touched on this before, but I mean, a lot of the internal operations that people don't see, especially with Coca-Cola, like our internal recycling, I think that all of our facilities and our production centers should be 100% landfill free. There's no excuse for it, except for maybe some of the things that people bring in from the outside, like, I don't know, like chip wrappers and stuff for lunch that are very hard to recycle. But everything from a production line should be recycled, like our cans and bottles that are kicked out that don't need specs, stuff like that. Our energy efficiency, we have, I forget what you call it, but we've been looking into solar panels on top of our roofs and stuff like that. There's so many things that we can get going that we haven't done yet because we're such a young company, believe it or not. But I think from pressure from the inside, from people like me, I think we could get those changes going. And it's also good that we have a leader right now, Paul Mulligan. He's one of our co-founders. He's been in the Coke system forever. We had a discussion with him, and he said one of the things that keeps him up at night, he lives in New York City, is seeing a Coke bottle flowing down the Hudson River. And I 100% agree with that. And I think that's the mindset that all of our leaders need to have within the Coke system.
That's great. Great imagery. Thanks, Keegan. Jill or Corey, consumer?
Yeah, I would add, I think this is a little bit niche to the data world of all of sustainability, but I think internally, that's something that's not going to be pushed by consumers at all. But what's really needed in the data collection of all the sustainability topics is just more quality and consistency. I thought it was really interesting. So we have been working with PwC to audit all our data, sustainability data in the past few years, and was listening to a webinar they did the other day, and they said that across the board, this is a big four accounting firm that works with tons of huge companies around the world. Across the board, they said that sustainability data is not consistent, it's not verified, it's not quality. And how can we be making real change that's impactful and effective when we're working off of data that's not even that great? So I think that's like a really big internal barrier that I see. That's something that, again, customers aren't going to be able to affect. It's something we need to work on ourselves, and that the field and the profession needs to work on as a whole. But then I think, kind of to your question about like other things consumers can do, this sort of falls into PR, but we are very aware of NGOs and how people like Greenpeace will put out like sustainability scorecards on different grocery supermarkets, talking about anything from like seafood sourcing to amount of packaging to human rights violations in our supply chains. And then you always see like links at the bottom that say like contact your grocery store or whoever to say that you want this to change. And so I do think like as a consumer, that's another great channel to focus efforts in, because that's something that we really do listen to NGOs when they're contacting us and when they're putting out publications, and that helps us to determine what areas we need to focus on and where we need to change.
Thank you, Jill. Corey, anything else to add here?
Yeah, and I'm trying to find a way to not make this too pessimistic. But for a long time, I was hopeful that individuals and kind of individual behavior and action was going to be a major tool for solving climate change, implementing sustainability, whatever it may be. I've grown increasingly skeptical of that over recent years, and this is really just kind of a personal opinion, but and something recent has really driven that home for me. If we as a society can't even come to kind of a mutual agreement that we're gonna all wear masks to prevent a very near term, very real, very tangible threat to our entire society, how can we ever expect people to actually implement behavior change in their life to solve climate change, which is so far removed, so distant, so long in time scale? And so this is kind of like a personal issue that I've been having in recent months and years, just kind of coming to grips with how much I think individuals will rise to the challenge to solve big problems like this. And so, I think I've focused my professional career more recently on trying to remove the consumer and the individual from the solution, and focusing on using corporate policy, national policy, whatever it may be, to kind of drive solutions on their behalf, and really take that decision making, which, to be honest, for a lot of people is focused on economics. It's focused on what's the most near-term economic and best decision for me as a person. How can we take that out of the equation so that we don't force people to make that decision, and we make it a little bit easier for them by doing it at levels above them? So I hate to be pessimistic, but that is how I feel. And I think that's a challenge we all face in this industry.
Corey, I don't think it's pessimism. I think that's fire. You see a contrast and want to do something about it, and I think that's incredibly valuable. And any consumer speaking up to a brand, if you write to me on Instagram, my brand on Instagram, or write to the customer service department with thoughtful questions. If it's abrasive, it may get tossed away. But if it's a thoughtful question about what are you doing here, why aren't you doing that, what about this, we're listening. And we've made some, as a non-essentials consumer goods retailer, we've just recently even made some massive, massive shifts internally and with the thinking at the leadership level based on a huge volume of consumer feedback. So giving feedback, Jacob, to the companies you're buying from and asking questions is impactful. And it's also incredibly powerful to vote with your dollars. Buy from brands that you believe are in line with your values, that are doing the right thing, and those who aren't, ask them questions, please.
All right, I think we better wrap up because we've hit 2 o'clock, but Ashley, thank you so much for leaving us on a positive, hopeful note that there is something we can do as individuals, and hopefully there's something we can do more collectively. I want to thank you all so much, Ashley and Keegan and Corey and Jill. It's really been a pleasure to hear your stories, and I know that the fellows and interns have learned a ton from your experience. We hope that you will all keep in touch with us and keep in touch with each other. Please connect on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And want to remind you all that we are taking a break next week from the webinar series so the fellows can give their midterm presentations. So fellows, we know you'll be there, and everyone else, we hope you'll join us to hear about what the fellows have been up to this summer. 2 weeks from now, so on the 16th, we will continue our alumni webinar series with a focus on sustainable food systems and public health. So we will see you then, if not sooner, and have a great long weekend. Thank you, everybody.